Hello there, my very good friends. Andy Murray here for What Culture Wrestling, aka your favourite Moby lookalike's favourite Moby lookalike. And I stand before you here today with just one goal in mind. That is to break down what I consider to be one of AEW's greatest successes so far, their storytelling. And I'm going to do that without making a single reference to any other promotion. Sound good? Cool. Let's do it. We'll begin with one of Jim Ross's favourite old quotes. It's all about the winner's purse. So we already know that wins and losses matter in AEW. Now this idea is the very core of professional sports, and it used to be the core of pro wrestling. And what it does is it gives everything a sense of purpose and enables the suspension of disbelief within a sporting framework. And in any sport, even this weird fake one that I dedicate my life to, stories naturally emerge from this very framework. To think about it in real sporting terms, you get things like legacy rivalries, things like Ali versus Frazier, you get mighty giant killings and David rising to the top to slay Goliath, think Leicester City winning the Premier League, and of course, you get dastardly pantomime villains as well. In AEW, this framework manifests as wrestlers who are in good form moving up the rankings. I mean, look at Cody. He got his AEW world title shot on the back of a very impressive win-loss record. And on top of that, the guy he drew with, the guy who pushed the number one contender to his limit, Darby Allin, well, he was pushed towards contendership and the number one contenders match with Jimmy Havoc as a result of matching the number one contender. There's always an incentive to win in AEW because that number, that W, is all important. And what this does is it means that every single thing that happens on these shows is of consequence in what AEW is supposed to be. It's a league that immerses viewers in its fictional universe. And on the other side of the equation, there's gravity to every single loss. Some AEW viewers and casual observers might tell you that the promotion have mishandled Hangman Page and Kenny Omega. Let's spend a minute or two breaking those claims down. Beginning with Page, that guy has a very mixed win-loss record, and this is amplified by his failure to become AEW World Champion. But what this does, what these failures do, is inform his character arc. And if you go and look at a recent episode of Being the Elite, you will see he quit the Elite, he quit that stable, because he felt that he personally wasn't living up to the Elite's very moniker. As for Kenny Omega, well, that man is currently plotting a divisive arc on his own, and it's all based around the idea that he isn't the same man that he was in Japan. As JR tells us on commentary, in kayfabe terms, there is a very big chance that Kenny left his wrestling heart somewhere in Tokyo. Now, he had early on a string of rather disappointing losses that really broke his confidence. I'm talking Chris Jericho, I'm talking Pac. So what he did in response to this was he tried to overcompensate. He, went after Jon Moxley, who attacked him at Double or Nothing in his own domain. He faced him in a lights-out, unsanctioned match. To prepare for that, he tried to G himself up by facing Joey Janela. He overcame that hurdle. But then he met Moxley, the master, in his own domain, and he failed. What AEW did with this whole narrative, with this whole Kenny Omega character arc, is neatly sidestep a potentially massive plot hole, because the thing is, if you book Kenny Omega the way he was booked in New Japan, then he'd be on a crash course for a collision with Chris Jericho, and well, it's just way too early to book that rematch. And besides, Jericho can't be losing the title to a guy like Omega right now, because as Le Champion, the guy's been bloody brilliant. AEW have to present this version of Chris Jericho right now, because as soon as he got the belt, he used his legacy, his reputation, his credibility to give that belt instant prestige, and now it really does feel like one of the worthiest prizes in all of wrestling. Chris Jericho is a heel. That means he can't be a chaser. He has to be a holder, and he will defend that belt with gravitas and desperation. But Kenny Omega, well, he's a babyface in all of this. He can wait, and his kind of downfall, his character arc, helps inform this. Kenny Omega isn't buried. Kenny Omega isn't a nerd. He isn't a dork. He isn't a geek. What Kenny Omega is a world-class professional wrestler who has been forced on a road to retribution obscured by the cloud of doubt. And that, my friends, is part of how AEW have perfected pro wrestling storytelling. So wins and losses matter is so much more than a catchy marketing phrase. It is everything when it comes to how these characters, how these wrestlers are presented. Kenny Omega isn't being buried by AEW because AEW aren't burying the leads. And if guys like him and Paige feel like losers at any given time, it's because they're, well, losing. Every sports team, every individual suffers losses at some point. I remember how I felt the first time Anderson Silva got beat in the UFC when his leg snapped like a twig against Chris Weidman. It just happens. And if AEW is presenting itself as a sports league, maybe it's time we just abandon terms like buried once and for all. Outside of title pictures, AEW likes to market itself as something of a buffet of professional wrestling styles. Even though Dynamite is kind of known for its electric brand of tag team wrestling. You know the brand I'm talking about. We here at What Culture like to call it cocaine wrestling rather cheekily, because, well, that's exactly what it is. What AEW have is a diverse roster that drives storylines relevant to pro wrestling. In real sports, you might have a gung-ho, attacking, exciting team who leave themselves open at the back to counterattacks, making themselves vulnerable. You might have a youthful team possessing pace and vigor, but ultimately they come undone for a lack of experience. And you know what? Those two descriptions there, those two illusions sound an awful lot like one Darby Allin, who, well, he's lost every big match he's had so far because of those reasons, but he's gotten over in defeat because of his creativity, his heart, and his resilience. Take a program like Joey Janela versus Shawn Spears. It's not exactly a headlining feud in the promotion, but it is driven by a believable source of conflict that benefits immensely from AEW's drive for wrestlers to express themselves. Janela, of course, gets called a garbage wrestler by certain types of wrestling critics. Now, Shawn Spears and Tully Blanchard have been positioned as guys who hate that kind of wrestling, so instantly you have a nice little storytelling branch. That, really, is how pro wrestling storytelling is supposed to be. AEW aren't taking silly, daft ideas that don't necessarily fit with characters. They're taking characters, they're taking parts of their personalities, elements of their performance, and crafting storylines around that. And AEW draws their characters together so naturally. Examples? Examples. How about Jon Moxley? He is an element of chaos. He is the baddest man on the planet in that promotion. But then you've got a guy like Darby Allin who might aspire to that role. So what does he do? Challenges him on an episode of Dynamite. Similarly, Rey Fenix and Nick Jackson are two of the most state-of-the-art, cutting-edge high flyers on planet Earth. So what did they do? They went head-to-head to see who was the best. What AEW are doing in those matches is engineering style battles and battles within those styles that are consistent with the characters, and again, this enables the suspension of disbelief. If you're a professional football fan, what they're essentially doing is creating the same kind of debate that you and all your mates have over Cristiano Ronaldo, Leo Messi, and Shola Ameobi. And of course, another aspect that has driven pro wrestling storytelling for decades is factions, and in that regard, in AEW, Chris Jericho's Inner Circle was an act of genius. I mean, the group's name alone tells you instantly that this is all about Chris Jericho. This is his Inner Circle. And there will come a time eventually when guys like Sammy Guevara and Proud and Powerful get tired of being battered first lines of defenses. And eventually, maybe a year from now, they're going to get sick of that. And they're going to turn on Jericho. Jericho, at the moment, well, he really hides behind these guys. He uses them effectively as cannon fodder, while these guys, well, they know they can use his profile to elevate their own. It's really easy to believe in. And of course, the angles that birthed the Inner Circle have been very effective. And in just 2 short weeks, in just 8 days of television, AEW either furthered or advanced or foreshadowed a whole bunch of different programs. You had Cody versus MJF, you've got Cody versus Chris Jericho, the Young Bucks versus Proud and Powerful, Dustin Rhodes versus Jake Hager, and that's just naming a few. But of course, the end result for this story, as teased by Cody Rhodes, is almost certainly the match beyond. In the end, every single pro wrestling storyline leads to the same thing, a match. And the way AEW plot and build towards these matches has created some excellent episodic TV every single week. Jericho is an absolute genius at this because his unscripted promos are those of a perfect heel who has an awesome balance between piss funny and just really resentful. AEW understand this, and that's why they trust him in this role. And man, the little details that AEW just throw into all of these things are just mwah. Let's take a guy like Sammy Guevara. He's an annoying little vlogger. So what does he do when Dustin Rhodes is getting beaten down backstage? He's filming it on his little selfie camera on his phone, and he's introducing the crowd to what's happening. And you also get things like Matt Jackson interrupting a perfectly, conveniently cinematic stare down at the end of a show because the man just wants a fight. It's wrestling, it's a fight, and it's not cinema. Now, you might love AEW's approach to pro wrestling storytelling, or you might prefer another, but ultimately, to analyse how effective or successful it is, as in any other art form, you have to look at how it's affecting the consumer. So let's consider this looking at some of AEW's biggest players. We've got Cody, probably the most over babyface in North America. Chris Jericho, over as hell. MJF, over as hell. Scorpio Sky, over. Jon Moxley, over. The Young Bucks, over. Darby Allin, over. Hangman Page, over. I could go on. And yeah, I could stand here as well and list maybe a handful of AEW wrestlers who aren't over. Let's say, I don't know, the Librarians or the Dark Order. But, you know, what's the common thread between all of these people who aren't over? They haven't had a proper storyline yet. They haven't yet benefited from the complex storytelling mechanism that's getting these performers over in the first place. Ultimately, what this is all about is a reward for investment. You're spending time with these characters, you're watching their trials, their tribulations, you're watching them grow, and in the end, it pays off. So, AEW has perfected pro wrestling storytelling in the men's singles and tag team divisions. The women's division, unfortunately, is still very underdeveloped, but Kenny Omega has promised to fix that by 2020. Now, a lot of people have been understandably cynical about this take because, well, if you look at it so far, unfortunately, it just hasn't quite delivered to the expected levels. But here's the thing. After everything I've just said, after all the successes of AEW's proven storytelling mechanism, why wouldn't you trust the process, man? Anyway, guys, that's it. My take on AEW's storytelling is over, so go ahead and fire off your own down in the comment section below. And once you've done that, of course, you can like, you can share, you can subscribe, you can ring the bell for notifications. Then you can follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and myself at Andy H. Murray if you want to tell me how wrong I am. Goodbye.